Late night store clerks. What is the strangest things that's happened on the job? I worked at a small convenience store in the early 1990 AS. They had one of those fry delis that had chicken, JoJo's, corn dogs, burritos, etc. This particular night, I had run out of burritos and chicken. I also shut the thing down and cleaned it all out about an hour before closing. About 5 minutes before I was closing up, a guy walked in 9 to close, and the fryer was shut down. He walked around the store for a minute. I assumed he was looking for something else to buy. And then he came up to the counter, pulled out a knife, and told me if I didn't cook him some burritos, he was going to beat me. I freaked out, but told him I had none to cook. I showed him the freezer and told him I would happily cook anything he wanted from it, but he will see I was out of burritos. He looked in it for a minute, turned to me and said, "You really are out?" I replied, "Yeah." He then put the knife away and left the store. I called the police and described the guy, but never heard from them again, so I assume he got away. The burrito bandito could still be roaming the streets. Story 2. A guy came in to buy beer after hours. Told him I couldn't sell. It was against the law. He pulled out a badge, said, "I am the law." I called 911 and a cop shows up. Tells me if I can just let it go, I wouldn't have any more problems. I let it go. 2 weeks later, driving home late at night, way over the speed limit, I got pulled over. It was cop #2. He came up to the car, recognized me, said slow down and left. Story 3. A man came in 10 times within a single hour. He kept leaving and coming back without buying a single thing. Finally, on the 10th time, he comes up to the counter with a box of tampons. I proceeded to ask him, "Rough night?" To which he responded, "I really don't want to talk about it." Story 4. I've never been a store clerk, but I was lucky enough to witness the following story, circa 1996. A guy walks up to the surly clerk, who seemed to work 25 hours a day, and asks, "Do you sell eggs by the 1/2 dozen?" Clerk, "No, you have to buy a dozen." Guy, "I only need 6 inches." Clerk, "I don't care. You get 12 or you get 0. Without saying another word, the guy walks back to get his dozen eggs, pays, and walks out. Then he throws his 6 unwanted eggs at the store window before driving off. Story 5. I used to work the graveyard at a gas station near my place. Pretty normal night. Clean, stock smokes, clean again, sit behind the counter. A woman came in about mid-30s with a little boy with her. She was in tears and her clothes were torn a bit. She came up and asked to use the phone. When she got off without getting an answer, she asked to stay here for a bit. I told her it would be no problem. About 20 minutes goes by, and I wound up giving her and her kid free drinks and one of the sandwiches we have on the hot rack. She was in the store for about 30 minutes until her boyfriend came in and found her and her kid. He was pretty calm at first, but then started screaming at her and telling her she needs to come with him. Luckily, before anything crazy happened, a cruiser pulls up to the front and 2 cops come in and intervened. He was arrested right there. I guess he had been beating her in front of her kid and she was trying to run away. I'm glad I got to keep her away from harm for at least a little bit. It was a scary night. Story 6. Had a guy pull up to the pump, unhooked it wanting post-pay. Our policy said not to authorize it between midnight and 5 a.m. Prepay only. I announced this to the dude over the loudspeaker. I'm pretty sure he was wasted. He continued to get more and more belligerent. When he started beating the pumps with the nozzle hose, I called the cops. Dude starts banging on the door. Locked, no way he would get in. Can't, gets frustrated, and finally just whips his deal out and starts wagging it in the general direction of the store. The CCTV is getting all this, so I just start laughing my ass off. Then the cops pull up, and 2 deputies put this poor, drunk, deal-wagging man away in the back of a police car. I quit a few months after that. Story 7? Let's see. Closed the store to play hockey on the roof, had a guy come in and inspect individual eggs in each carton until he found the perfect egg. Had an old guy who asked to use our bathroom. But first he needed reading material and asked for an adult mag from behind the counter, but when we gave it to him, he said he didn't like that one and asked for a different one. Then he died while crafting, normal crap like that. Story 8. Aside from the crap-covered walls and vomit that you'd expect from a typical gas station, I could say this was the most peculiar. I had a man come in and buy a novelty lighter and some lighter fluid. Sometime the next week, police came in and asked for our camera footage the night I sold the lighter and stuff. The guy apparently used that lighter and fluid to kill his baby. Damn people, man. Story 9. Huge guy comes in and asks to use the restroom. No big deal, I'm not one to stand in the way of nature. Well, maybe 20 minutes later, guy comes our in huff and says, "Dude, I'm really sorry I ducked up your toilet." "It's all good, man, I'll get it." Not really needing spectators while I cleaned crap. I expect the guy to shrug his shoulders and walk off. Well, he looks back into the back where the restroom is with a look of disgusting concern and says, "Man, it's really coming out. Like it's coming out into the back room." I rush back, thinking I've got to at least stop this from becoming some kind of biohazard event. I round the corner and there's nothing, but I can smell an unholy, overwhelming stench. I continue back, expecting to ruin my shoes at any moment until I reach the men's room. At this point, I've had to cover my face with my shirt and focus on breathing through my mouth, but I reach the door with no issue. Frustrated from the mind-numbing odor alone, I push the men's room door open. ready for at least an inch of gas station dukes all over the floor. As the door swings forward, I see nothing but the water filling my eyes and the black-brown human paint, the fat git left against the back of the bowl, pissed to the point of rushing out, fully intending of asking this rotten-as-hole what the deal was. I round the corner again to see his big crap-eating grin spread across his face. Stinks, huh? Story 10. 11:30 p.m. in AOS here and on break working till 4 a.m. in a sort of restaurant, fast food store. Last week I saw a woman order 4 burgers but wanted no ingredients other than lettuce. Not even any bread. I offered if she would like to just buy the lettuce as a topping and just pay $1.25 for it. But she insisted on ordering 4 servings of burger lettuce at full burger price. Story 11. I work nights at a gas station in a pretty good neighborhood in New Hampshire, so usually it's pretty boring. One night I did have a customer really creep me out. I was just getting ready to close down the store when a little old man came in. He was small and dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt. I made the usual small talk of asking him how his day was going. Then as I was handing him his change, he firmly grabbed my wrist, made direct eye contact with me and said, "Hell is a real place, and the devil has already got his hand on you, girl. Be careful." Story 12. I was just talking to a friend about stuff like this maybe a week ago. For reference, he works 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. at a gas station in a really rough neighborhood. Here are some of the things he has told me about. A woman came into the store at 3 a.m. screaming about her boyfriend being an asshole and refused to leave. Substances sales literally every night. They found footprints on the toilet seat and a bag of Met in the ceiling tiles. A man came in to use the bathroom at midnight. He was still in there half an hour later, and so my friend knocked. He didn't respond. Paramedics were called when he was found to be near death from an overdose. Cops come in on a regular basis looking for people. Drunk people making threats of violence if they don't get more beer. Story 13. I work at this crafty local fast food joint, which I won't name. Anyways, one night me and one other guy have to run the whole damn place because the manager can't be bothered to do his job. I don't get scared easily, but it gets spooky when it gets late, like I'm running to the dumpster and back. Then this hole that I work with starts making up this crap story about some serial killer, which ordinarily wouldn't bother me, but it's late. Then crap goes from bad to worse. The lights on the inside reflecting off the glass doesn't let us see out very far, but we can hear a guy kind of scraping, if that word makes sense, at the door. I turn and make eye contact, and his eyes are dinner plates. He kind of squeaks out a sentence. All I made out sounded something like, "the hash-slinging slasher." Story 14. Not a late-night clerk as my store closes at 9, but some pretty strange things have happened, in no particular order. A woman tried to tell me that Jesus could talk to her through her eyes and that we were all going to hell. A man came in for no reason other than to take a crap in aisle 3. Some guy tried to come in and steal cigarette from behind our counter and may have gotten away with it if he had not then tried to buy cigarettes with the other ones stuffed down his shirt. 2 different people have tried to lock themselves in our bathroom and tell us that that was their home now. Once a week, someone will try to buy our entire cereal aisle, just pulling entire displays off the shelf and trying to do it as quickly as possible. Like getting into a line is some sort of free pass and we have to let him buy the stuff. An ex-employee one time came back in after hours, as we were closing down stuff for the night and started to work. She was behind the deli counter just cutting meat, talking to invisible customers. We later found out she was high on substances. A guy got locked in our backroom freezer after hours. We only knew he was there because he escaped and broke a window that set off our alarms. That was the first time we replaced the giant display windows. The second time was right after we had just shut down for the night. Kids on bikes threw rocks through our windows. The sound was terrifying. Even though we had them on camera, the store never pressed charges. Story 15. I watched a truck pull up to one of our pumps. Guy gets out to pump gas. A Durango comes hauling ass from the back of the building. Another guy gets out with a gun aimed at the first guy. I was on the phone with a friend of mine and said, "Someone just pulled a gun at the pump. I'm going to have to let you go." I called the cops. Turned out the guy pumping gas had robbed a store 3 towns over, and the Durango was an undercover cop who had been in pursuit. Another time, a guy came in, walked to the back cooler, got a can of Sprite, and came to the register to check out. As I'm ringing him up, one of our local cops walks in. Gun drawn, says, "Put your hands on the counter. Put your hands on the counter now." Well, I put my hands on the counter along with the customer because all I'm thinking is, I have no idea what I've done, but I'm very sorry for it. Turned out that guy had been involved with a robbery of a convenience store in the next town, 5 minutes away, had fled in a Mustang with 2 other individuals. They wrecked the car trying to evade the cops. All 3 dispersed 2 were apprehended pretty quickly, but the third came into the store to either blend in or rob me. I honestly don't know which. After the festivities and them hauling the guy away, the cop told me he had almost lost it when I put my hands on the counter too, and that I should really rethink working closing shifts at my age. I was 19 at the time, and I am female. I laughed and was like, "And give up free entertainment?" First story to clarify, the undercover cop jumped out of the Durango with a gun pointed at the suspect. Story 16. In high school, I worked at a little mom and pop department store. We sold odds and ends at super high prices, and they eventually went out of business when I was a couple years into college. Anyway, one night I was working a closing shift, and that involved shutting down the registers, turning off all the lights, etc. We had just stocked these baby doll toys on the shelf that day, those motion-sensing ones that giggled and cooed when you got close to them. Well, the lights turning off must have triggered them because after the first chunk goes out, we hear coos. Second chunk goes out, giggles. Third chunk goes out, and we hear Islam is the light. Needless to say, we shipped those suckers back to the manufacturer. They didn't know about the propaganda babies because they only said that phrase randomly, so it must have gotten past whatever testing process they had. Very freaky to hear in a dark store at night. Story 17. I worked at a 24/7 gas station in a small college town. One night, the club across the street had a fight break out, and about 50 people were pepper sprayed by the police when they responded at about 1:30 a.m. 5 minutes later, cue 50 angry clubgoers busting into the store, running to the dairy cooler, dousing themselves in milk, and then running back out. I just stood there in utter confusion, and then told my boss I didn't want the late shift anymore. Story 18. Graveyard shift at a gas station. Full serve gets shut down after 11 p.m. because there's only one clerk on site. Traffic cones block the full serve pumps. Signs inform the customer. Around midnight, a van pulls up with California plates and peace love signs in the windows. Woman gets out, moves the traffic cones, and pulls up to full serve. I use the intercom to tell her that she will have to use self-serve if she wants gas. No answer. I go to the door and try to wave her over or call out to her. Can't see any sign of her. I shrug and go back inside. I'm not allowed to leave the store unattended, so there's not much I can do. 10 minutes later, a woman gets out of the van and comes in. I've been waiting for service for over an hour, she says. I decided not to argue about the time elapsed and just say, I'm very sorry, ma'am, but we don't offer full serve after 11 o'clock. Perhaps you noticed the traffic cones and signs to that effect? You expect to pump my own gas? She says. Again, I'm sorry. I'd be happy to help you, but I can't leave the store unattended. I appreciate your understanding. She snorts and digs a 20 out of her purse and tosses it on the counter. She goes out, moves the van to self-serve, pumps the gas. Then she comes back. May I use your restroom, please? She asks. Absolutely, right back there, I say, relieved. She goes to the restroom and she's in there for about 15 minutes. I start to worry. Finally, she comes out and comes to the counter. I know all about you, she says. You're the one brought the Black Plague. You brought it all the time forever. It was always you. You caused all those deaths, all that suffering. Did you like hearing people wail and scream? I bet you loved it. All the demons love it. That's you. You're a demon. You are evil. I can tell. And I'll tell you something else. You skunk me up, I'll skunk you back. I stared at her, retreating back, speechless. She got in her van and drove away. Skunk her up because I didn't pump her gas? Weird. I went back to fronting shelves for about 30 seconds before I thought, perhaps I should check the bathroom. I walk back and push open the door. Crap. Crap everywhere. On the walls, the floor, the mirror, the sink, all over the toilet lid and the tank. Crap on the door, clearly smeared by hand. And oh, the stench. As I turned to get the cleaning supplies, I muttered under my breath, you skunked me back all right. Yes, you did. Sigh. Story 19. I worked 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift in an all-night garage for a few months when I was 18. There was this weird Vietnamese dude who drove a white Honda Prelude and always filled up with $6.66 of petrol. He wore the same pair of cutoffs every time, with blotches and bruises all over his legs, and used to literally wander in, leaning against the displays, pick up as many yogurts as he could carry, pay with a $50 note, and stagger out. One time he came in with these two, obviously escort women who were DD'd all over him with the biggest pupils I have ever seen. They stood at the counter while I scanned all their yogurts, and he spoke for the first and only time. Staring at me, said to the women, she can join us, can't she? One of the women looked at me and said, you'll make a lot more money if you come with us, darling. I nervously laughed, took their cash, and they left, grinning in silence. Story 20. I worked through my college years at a grocery store in a college town. I worked in the deli bakery and daytime cashier. One night, I was asked to work the late shift for time and a half. I didn't have class the next day, so yeah, it was a night I will never forget. As I was transitioning from day to late night shift around 9 p.m., a kid came in and started just eating olives off the deli bar with his bare hands. Cops get called. He is found 5 minutes later, assaulting the soda machine outside, screaming and crying at the same time. Then arrested while high on what was probably meth. A plethora of drunk sorority and frat gits pouring in between midnight and 3 a.m. trying to buy alcohol when they were already crap-faced. The town had a bus system that ran all over the place for free, and we were a very central stop. Had to call a code Wood. to summon our late-night stalker who was indeed built like a tree trunk. Some punks wanted to steal some fillies and demanded to just hold on to them while they shopped, then got confrontational when I wouldn't give the fillies to them before paying. For clarification, since I'm a terrible writer, Wood was a night stockman who probably went to bodybuilding competitions on the weekends. Hence, I was calling him to the front to help me deal with the hooligans until the police could show up. After the cop showed up with her K9 from said confrontation, she decided to hang out and talk to me for a while. She showed me a bunch of fake IDs she'd collected. I talked to a mother whose son just passed away the day before. We talked for about an hour. Then she went out to her car and chain smoked while crying for a few hours. The insomniac kid kept coming into the store to buy food and smokes. The street sweeper guys showed up around 5 a.m. to clean the lot. They had to come inside to use the restroom. In that amount of time, their street sweeper got stolen because they left the keys in and running. Not sure if they ever got it back, but I imagine it would be hard to hide in a small college town. Story 21. Beat-up kid comes to us at 3 a.m. Blood everywhere. Doesn't want us to call an ambulance. Our policy says if they don't want us to, we can't. So he was just chilling there. When we said we were going to call the cops to help, he bolted. My bet was he had a warrant out for his arrest, so that's why he didn't want any medical police attention. Story 22. Back from my days working graveyard shift at a grocery store. Let's see what I can remember. Had a former employee come in drunk one night and call the cops on himself for shoplifting because he wanted somewhere to sleep that night. Had an employee come in on a night off, all pissed off, proceeds to walk straight to the back room without a word. About 10 minutes later, there was a successive loud pop, 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 pop. Turns out he climbed up to the roof to fire off his gun. A customer came up and told me he heard something fall down in the back room. Tons of stoners buying ice cream at 2 a.m. Meth heads buying Brillo pads and ammonia after 3 a.m. Bars closed at 2 a.m. So all the cops were usually gone from the area by around 3. Saw a drunk guy fall asleep while his car idled along in the parking lot. Luckily, he hit a curb and no damage was done, but the cops got a good laugh out of that one. A tall drunk Russian guy tries to buy beer after the 2 a.m. legal cutoff time, then proceed to pick on a sober customer half his size. The little guy took one swing and broke the Russian dude's nose. Had a guy come in when another employee was taking a dump. Guy really had to take a crap, so he turned around and took a dump in the urinal, asking the employee on the toilet for toilet paper. Story 23. I worked third shift at a Sheetz. For those of you who don't know, it's a gas station, convenience store, fast food place. On multiple occasions, I have been cussed out because we discontinued pickle chips. I've had people tell me to duck off, break things, demand to call corporate, etc. Drunk people love pickle chips. Story 24. The place I worked had a monitor camera that showed you on it as you walked it. It was like 10 minutes before closing, and a guy walks in and just starts rapping into the camera and acting like he's shooting a music video. He went through an entire song. Story 25. I always got the graveyard shift when I worked at a gas station. By midnight, the clientele is almost exclusively homeless people buying booze. All the other gas stations and convenience stores turned them away, but we were a small, independent gas station, and sacks of change. The hobos panhandled were the lifeblood of our business. I got offered crack fairly regularly, which I always politely declined. I learned that hobo names are still a thing. They'd introduce themselves with names like The Wolf or Vietnam or Big Chief. One hobo saw me riding away on my bicycle after work and angrily demanded I give him a ride across town. One hobo came up and said, "I have no money. Here's my ID for collateral." He slapped his driver's license and his glasses down and grabbed a case of Budweiser. I told him I couldn't accept that as currency. He thought about it for a minute, then said, "What would you do if I just grabbed it and ran out?" I told him to leave. One of the other customers, a rare non-hobo, spoke up and said, "The kid said get out." The hobo lunged for the beer. The other guy tries to stop him. Next thing I know, they're rolling around the parking lot fighting. I call the cops. The hobo runs off. The guy comes back in and insists he's fine, buys some sunflower seeds and leaves. The cops show up. They say that because he ran off, there's honestly little chance of IDing him, let alone catching him. I hand the officer the hobo's ID. One time this Mexican guy comes in and buys 2 40s, one for himself and one for the 2 hobos outside. I watch from the window as he hands it to one of them, which makes the other hobo mad. Rather than sharing it, they decide that they are going to fight for it, and a brawl ensues. They are in the middle of the road. A car almost hits them. The Mexican guy is watching all this like he's watching a game of golf, sort of a half-bored expression on his face. Finally, one of them gets the idea to grab the bottle and run away. The other guy chases after them, and I never saw them again. I heard later through the hobo vine that one of them was hit by a car and died. One time, a guy brought his kid with him into the store at about 3 a.m. An escort was there buying alcohol, and this guy was totally comfortable propositioning her right there in front of me and his kid as they stood in line, buying candy, presumably for the kid. She was really weirded out by it and made up some excuse. He persisted, she got weirded out and left. As he's paying, he gives me a friendly, knowing look and says, "Women, right?" I felt really bad for that kid. Story 26. I work at a deli, and about a half hour from close, a woman comes to the counter and just says, "Lamb bone." We had it, so I go to the back freezer. Come back to the counter and her daughter is there. She tells me to cancel the order. Meanwhile, her mom is right beside her, repeating "lamb bone" over and over again. She had dementia, and I didn't even notice. Story 27. I worked at an adult video store when I was going to university, about 15 years ago. One night it was around 10 p.m., and I was just sitting around alone in the store, and this big guy runs in and dumps a whole pile of pocket electronic dictionaries, high-tech back then I guess, on the counter and tells me to put them in a bag. They were all in the package, and he looked pretty nervous, so I assumed he had stolen them from another store. I put them in a bag for him, and he grabbed the bag and started walking around and looking at the videos. He was dirty and acting really weird. I started to get nervous. He was just giving off a really bad vibe. He took off his jacket as he walked around and just left it on the floor. I mentioned he was big, but seeing when he took off his jacket, man, he was muscular. He was dirty and obviously on substances, but the dude must have worked out every day. We had a viewing room. That's a whole other story. And he told me he'd give me a pocket dictionary if I let him view a movie. I told him, no, obviously. I'm just sitting there behind the counter watching him walk around, all tripped out on whatever it was he was on. And all of a sudden, he just stops in front of a wall of videos and starts scratching his ass over his pants. I give him a few seconds, but he's still going, just staring blankly at the wall. Then he puts his hand into his pants and continues scratching. At this point, I was really freaked out because he had been acting so strange. I was also thinking, if he's willing to steal those dictionaries from a store, what would he do here, where all the windows are blocked out and no one can see inside? He's still got his hand down his pants, scratching his ass, just looking blankly at the wall of videos, so I pick up the phone and call 911. I speak low and relaxed into the phone to the lady that answered and told her there's someone in the adult store who is making me really uncomfortable. He never even noticed. He was still in space scratching his ass. She asked me what he's doing, and I look over again, and by this time he's fully doubled over and digging for gold. He's going so hard at his ass that his pants are falling down. He was literally fingering his butthole, bent over with his pants halfway down his thighs. I looked away for no more than a couple of seconds as I spoke on the phone with the operator and turned back around to see him with his pants completely down, sitting on the big yellow mop bucket in the back of the store, taking a crap. At that point, I freaked out and told him to get the duck out of the store. He ran towards the front, and for a brief second I thought he was coming behind the counter to do God knows what, but he ended up just running out the door. I told the lady on the line to send someone right quick and locked the door to the store. Although I didn't want to, I went back to look in the bucket. It was full of dark red blood. I don't know what was wrong with that dude, but he was in really bad shape. When the cops got there, they essentially laughed at the story and then went out looking for the guy, but never found him. I opened the back door of the store and kicked the mop bucket as far into the back alley as I could. A weird story and maybe a bit funny, but it actually ducked me up for quite a while. I never felt comfortable working in that store again. If that dude was that ducked up, I figure it was luck that he didn't try to rob me. He could have pulled out a knife and killed me, and absolutely no one would have been the wiser until another customer walked in or the dude opening up found me. Story 28. Used to work third shift overnight in a Texaco 20 years ago. One night, this guy in a bright yellow Mustang comes in to buy gas and beer. I run his credit card, and the register flags it for being stolen. So I tell the guy, your card won't work. Says I have to keep it. So the guy kind of freaks out, leaves his beer, then hops in his car and speeds off. I call the cops because he already pumped his gas and left without paying for it. So later I walk home at 6 a.m. I lived only a 5-minute walk away. As I'm walking, I see the yellow Mustang parked at an apartment complex across the street from my house. So I go back to work and call the cops again, explaining that I know where the guy lives. Presumably, after that, they found him and arrested him or whatever. A few days later, I had to do a friend a favor and take her to visit her boyfriend, who was in jail at the time. On our way out of the jail, some guy walks up to her to bum a cigarette off of her. It was the guy with the yellow Mustang. I sped up to walk ahead of them, so hopefully he wouldn't recognize my face. She gives him a cigarette, and he proceeds to complain about how he got arrested because he found a credit card. So of course he was going to buy some gas and beer with it. He didn't recognize me, so I remain unmurdered. Story 29. In high school, I worked at a 24 pharmacy, which also had a small selection of beer. At about 2 a.m., this guy walks in 3 sheets to the wind, saunters over to the beer, and grabs 2 12-packs. He comes up to the counter and slams the beer down, reaches into his pocket and pulls out a half-eaten taco and puts it on the counter. I couldn't say anything because I was so perplexed. I just let him walk out with the beer and told my bosses I thought he might have a gun also. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. A couple weeks later, he apparently tried this at the family-owned gas station across the street and got shot. Story 30. All right, I worked midnights for many, many years when I was younger, and I've seen some crap. I've been robbed, beaten, gotten laid, and made money. People would give me gifts like things they got from work, or half-lit joints and baggies of substances and full pizzas. After a while, it's almost like a hidden world that you become part of, and things that seem irregular become part of the norm. There was the guy who gave me $500 to let him snort powder in the washroom for a couple hours. Told me to clean up good after he was done. Left some for me too. Then there was the cross-dressing little person with a beard like Top. The first 2 times he came in, I felt so bad because I was trying not to laugh. Turns out he was a regular. He always had what I can only assume was a high-class escort every Sunday. Always a different girl, and he always wore the same short leather skirt. He liked ketchup chips and Halls and was an extremely nice guy. Another time, these 2 very voluptuous escort drove up in a limo full of rich dudes. One of the girls was flirting with me at the counter, and one of the guys came up and put his arm around her. She laughed and told him I was staring at her boobs. So he pulled out a huge wad of cash and gave me 100 and her 100 and said, "Show him your tits then, sweetie." She lifted up her shirt and showed me. It happened so fast I felt my face blush. Thanks," I said, and he replied, "No problem, kid." And everyone laughed and they walked out. The other escort blew me a kiss. But the most strangest thing that has ever happened was when I worked at a gas station in a pretty bad neighborhood that had a lot of escort and crime. My boss was a real scummy guy, so he had a wall full of condoms behind the counter for Johns. It was quite awkward, but I got used to selling these seedy dudes condoms all the time. So this one time, an Asian man walked in and blatantly yells out that he wanted the smallest condoms I had in a very thick accent. Kept repeating it over and over. He wanted the smallest ones I had. Through suppressed sputters of laughter, I slowly realized he was damn serious. He was also in a big hurry, so now I'm in a hurry to get this clown out of my store. We awkwardly go through a bunch of condoms together, trying to find the smallest ones, reading the packages and such. I remember thinking this is the most ducked-up thing I have ever done on a midnight shift. Still, he didn't want any of them, and reluctantly just chose whatever from the I had on the counter. I bite at one. That's when I had a bright idea. You see, my boss put these latex finger cots in a drawer. He used them to count money. When I think back now, I should have used them too, because who knows where all that seedy money had been. Yikes. Okay, so I open the drawer and pull a handful of these bad boys out and ask him if these will do. His eyes lit up, and he started thanking me over and over. That's when I went ham and pulled out the box of latex fingers. "I'll sell you this box for 20 bucks, I said, and he damn took them. My boss was the kind of guy to check the cameras, so I told him what happened in the morning. He himself was also Asian, so it was quite awkward. But I told him to check the camera if he didn't believe me. I gave him 10 bucks and told him I'm keeping the other half. I can't make any of this crap up. True confessions of Midnight Store Clerk. Story 31, former swing shift casino security guard. Allow me to offer my meager contributions to the pile. The first time I ever had to deal with a customer complaint was a woman who told me she'd been playing the same slot machine all day and hadn't hit the jackpot yet. She felt she was entitled to a jackpot since she spent over $1,500 on that machine, and by entitled I mean she thought she was entitled to by law. I let the more senior security guy deliver the cold dose of reality concerning Nevada gaming law. Oh, and the jackpot she was after was only up to $900 or so by the time she complained. One of the few times I ever had to eject someone from the casino was a really old dude who almost literally lived at the casino. He slept in an RV parked in an empty lot behind us. It wasn't that he got rude or anything. It was that the night before had been the 2nd or 3rd consecutive night that he had crap his pants and not noticed. It was that awful, runny, oily diarrhea too. So it would run down his pant leg and pool on the floor, soak through his pants, and get onto the bar stool. I was told the reason we were 86ing him was for safety concerns, since at least 2 people other than him had slipped and nearly fallen in what was left after cleaning. My second night on the job, we caught some idiot teens doing donuts behind the casino in the vacant lot. We owned it. The minute we ran out to get license plates, the idiots took off, leaving 2 of their friends behind. We got the names of the drivers from those 2 by promising not to prosecute, despite those 2 not being on the hook for anything. Found out later from the cops that it was actually a kid and his best friend, with the kid's mother and stepfather in the second car. Family night in a small town. Had to 86 a sweet old bird because she slapped the bartender. Turns out her medication made her super sensitive to alcohol, to the point where 1 beer got her beyond trashed. Knowing this, she ordered a non-alcoholic beer. But even the 0.5% alcohol was enough to make her surly. The bartender saw what was going on and cut her off, so she slapped his crap. She was not a small woman either. Yet another ejection was some slightly unhinged homeless dude who was harassing guests. He wasn't rude or inappropriate or pushy. He just immediately thought anyone who acknowledged his existence was his best friend. I mean, literally, he thought that. And so with a new best friend to talk to, he would proceed to natter on about anything and everything, sometimes pedestrian topics, sometimes insane conspiracy theory topics. I wound up having a "wow man, how have you been" conversation with this guy as never met before, wherein I convinced him he'd been meaning to leave and had just forgotten it. A little underhanded, but it got him out the door in a good mood. As a bonus follow-up, he somehow managed to hitch a ride to the brothel 10 miles down the road where my girlfriend bartended, so then she had to deal with his insanity. Made us laugh when we put it together. About a year later, he was picked up for sneaking into an assisted living place in Carson City and getting in bed with one of the residents. Non-sexually, I should add. At trial, it took the judge about 2 minutes of listening to him ramble to deem him unfit to stand trial and committed him to the psych ward. Far as I know, he's still there. Story 32. I didn't work there, but I lived really close to a GameStop, and as a kid, me and my friends would go there and just hang out to try new games. One night, I go in there and my friend and I were trying out some new game on PS2 that was on their demo machine. There was a kid in the store with his mom that was clearly mentally ill that was chewing on the game racks and groaning. We just ignored him, although he was being very loud. The mother goes up to the counter to buy a game as a birthday present for her other daughter. I heard her asking if it would be a good game for a birthday present for a 10-year-old boy, so her and the GameStop clerk chatted for a bit. The mentally ill kid was lying between her legs on his stomach, looking at some of the games they had near the counter, which led to him finding one that he just had to get at this exact moment. He asks his mother, but she says no, as she had already picked out a game for him as well. All while this is going on, I'm still playing on the PS2 with my friend, and we're just listening to this happen at the counter. The kid asks again more angrily this time, and starts to whine that he can't have it, which was followed by a stern no from the mother. He gives it one last shot, and the mother again turns him down. Then this kid goes into full-on rage mode. He's about 5'7" and a good 170 pounds, so he's larger than your average kid. I heard a scream and a growl coming from that side of the store, and I see this kid just Hulk smash the movie rack, sending them all into the air and all over the ground. The PS2 we were playing at was in the corner of the store near the door, so this little Hulk monster runs to the back of the store and rounds the corner where he now has a straight shot to the PS2 we were at. My friend and I heard the commotion, so we turned around to see what was happening and see this kid ready to charge like a bull staring directly at us. As soon as we made eye contact, he charges with a full-out scream and hands over his head. My friend and I hide behind the PS2 in a few aisles before he gets to us. His mom lays him out from behind one of the other movie racks. The kid fell into the wall, releasing all the games on that wall from the shelf, which then covered him while he was on the ground. The mother apologizes to us and the store clerk and tells them to call the police. She said something that hinted this had happened before, and she knew an incident report needed to be filled out. She takes the kid over to the counter and puts him into a restraining hold, which wasn't too rough, but enough where he could rest his head on the counter but not move so he could calm down. Somewhere in the linebacker tackle his mother made, he had hit his head on one of the metal racks and was bleeding pretty profusely out of his forehead. After a few minutes of waiting for the police, the whole entire counter was covered in blood, and the GameStop employees were just standing there speechless. The police arrived and the kid calmed down once he felt the presence of the police. They asked us what happened and then just told the kid and his mother that they could go. My friend and I walked home just in awe of what we had just seen. Story 33. I was working the graveyard shift at a big grocery store doing the self-checkout registers. I was the only person around the store other than the stock crew and maybe 2 or 3 customers. I got a call from the fuel center and the attendant was freaking out and told me someone was flipping over the Coke machines. What the heck, right? And she was calling the police. I assumed the guy would just leave after that, so I held tight and waited for the police, until this young blonde guy walks in and calmly walked past me. I tailed him for a few aisles, and once he turned the corner on the baby aisle, he took off running and grabbed a big display of Dr. Seuss books and flung it to the ground. He ended up getting arrested at the entrance by a few cops, and I got asked question after question. All in all, a fun night. Story 34. Worked at a Taco Bell, live masquette, for years. A 24-hour one to boot. Oh, the things I've seen. Best story was the 2 escorts who tried to order food at the window. We can't take drive-thru orders at the windows. Store policy. They just stand there screaming, "We want tacos, get!" and "We'll show you our boobies for tacos." We ignore them. They try to get into the lobby, but the doors are locked past midnight. They proceed to take a huge steaming piss all over our sidewalk, go into our dumpsters and rip open the bags, so you know TB has the world's nastiest garbage, and start throwing crap at the restaurant. Funny thing was, the bag they opened was full of old tacos. You got what you wanted, get. Honorable mentions. People drive up with dudes passed out in their pickup beds in a pool of their own vomit. Escorts going from car to car in the drive-thru do BJ everyone. A guy tried to pull a gun on us via drive-thru window. All 3 of us working were strapped. Rough neighborhood. We just walked up to him, showed him our guns, and he took off running. For 6 months, the same dude. prob's a pimp, would roll up at 5 a.m. in a car filled with like 6 escorts. We'd know it was him because the first thing he would always say was, "What do you want? Get." Countless bathroom deals, countless bathroom drug overdoses, homeless guy living on our roof for 2 weeks without anyone knowing. Handicapped guy would come in with his caregiver, who would position him in front of the counter so he could watch us work while he pleasure himself. People ducking their burritos. People threatening to sue us because they burned themselves while ducking their burritos. Gay strippers doing drag shows by our dumpsters. And finally, the dude who asked us point blank. When we couldn't answer, he just ordered 6 menu items he thought would fit the bill. Then he parked in our lot for 2 hours. Story 35. I worked at Dunkin' Donuts. Every Tuesday night at about 8:45, a guy would come in. A guy in Daisy Dukes and a sequined bikini top. He was balding, had a beer gut and chest hair. He would strut his stuff to the counter and order 2 sprinkled donuts. Every Tuesday. Story 36. Over 7 years. Had a super hot but super drunk girl stumble in from the club next door and ask me for sex. I turned her down. Tried to convince a victim to call the police while cleaning defensive wounds. Managed to only convince her to call her mom. Looked up abuse counseling and gave the numbers to her mom when she showed up. Was offered a BJ from a really huge, gross, pit-stained woman if I sold her beer after hours while a gentleman slept in her truck. Had a guy run in with shoes tied to his hands and try to buy cat litter. Was robbed at flare gun point. Story 37. This is one of my favorite work stories, and I enjoy telling it. I work night shift in a gas station convenience store. One night, this dude came right up to the counter and asked for Marlboro Reds. The door was right by the counter, so I had barely had time to see him when he came in. I saw nothing out of the ordinary right away. He's a kind of dark-complected Hispanic guy, maybe about 5'4", wearing a flannel jacket. As I set his cigs on the counter, I see the shirt he's wearing under the jacket, a red crop top with D cups underneath. I'm thinking, okay, that's interesting, because I'm a pretty open-minded sort, but I had to see what bottoms he'd paired with the crop top, so as he left, I leaned over the counter to see. His jacket came to about the middle of his ass, and underneath it was nothing but shoes. I couldn't stop laughing about it for the rest of the night. I told one of my regular police officers about it, and he asked if I wanted to file a complaint. I told him I wouldn't bother since I didn't know anything about the little half-naked dude anyway. So fast forward to the following week. He comes in again, straight up to the counter, but without a jacket on today. He's wearing a red tank top and earrings and red lipstick. All I can see over the top of the counter where his bottoms were was some white lace. Once again, I give him his cigs. Once again, I look after him as he goes. And dude has basically a doily around his waist, completely sheer, only covers about half his ass. So I'm thinking I'm going to be clever and grab a cigarette and follow him out as though I'm just taking a break, and I'll get his license plate number. No sooner did I light my cigarette when he turns around and asks me for a light. I'm not kidding when I describe his skirt as a doily. It looked like a crocheted grandma's end table doily, and there was his junk, completely visible and actually hanging out a little from underneath the doily, because the doily was just that insubstantial. I lock eyes with him to keep from accidentally looking down again and light his cigarette for him, and he turns and goes. I told my regular officer about it, and he was able to find out a little about him, but I had already decided not to file a report myself. He wound up becoming a semi-regular customer for a couple years, and his appearance never ceased to cause me vast amounts of mirth. Things like this are what keep me working this job. People never cease to surprise and amuse me in new and strange ways. Story 38. I used to work at a gas station in a really small town. There was this old homeless guy with a weird glass eye that would walk around with an uncovered 5-gallon bucket of pickled pig's feet. The pig's feet were submerged in this pink picking juice that would splash all over the damn place when he walked around. Not to mention that during the summer, this bucket would damn reek. So one of my first days on the job, he came into the gas station to buy a tall boy Bud Ice. I rang him up and he plunged his hand down in the bucket and pulled out a pig's foot in which he slammed on the counter. After a bit of back and forth explaining that pig's feet were not a form of currency, I just gave in and let him have the $2 beer. I paid for it myself. So about once a week, he would walk in, and we would have this pickled pig foot ice understanding. Other customers in line would lose their ducking minds after seeing this deal go down. I'd throw the pig's feet in the woods out back where the stray cats would eat them. It was a whole ecosystem of ducking weirdness. This went on for about 6 months before I eventually found another job. The guy was insane, but nice as could be. I called him Pigfoot Larry. Story 39. Disclaimer. This story isn't very good, but I'm bored. Late shift at a motel. This middle-aged lady came in near the end of my shift when it was morning and asked about the town and other random things. She was kind of weird, but I like kind of weird people, so I didn't think much of it. Came into work for the next shift that night, and the person I was replacing was visibly freaked out and says this bat crap crazy lady came in dressed head to toe in full colonial garb, including a bonnet, couldn't pay for a room and said she'd be back in an hour with a credit card. The coworker said she followed the lady outside and she disappeared into the darkness. Colonial lady comes back in 20 minutes later, and it's the same lady as the morning before, but a million times weirder and creepier. Darting eyes, fragmented thoughts, and such an unpleasant and unsettling tone of voice. She says she's been trying to reach her mom for a credit card number, but hasn't been able to. Can she use the phone to try again? So I let her. She has me dial. Wired phone, gave her the handset, and no luck. Hit redial, same result. Weird. She always answers, she said. I wasn't sure if I dialed correctly. Maybe I didn't hit the area code right or didn't dial 9 to get out. So this time I took the phone and dialed to make sure. This number has been disconnected. I give her a weird look, and she repeats, she always answers. I tell her to pay or GTFO, and she leaves. I follow her, and she disappears into the darkness once again. I'm pretty sure she was a ghost from the 18th century who somehow knows what a phone is. I haven't pieced it all together yet. At all. Story 40. I've worked overnights at a gas station for 9 years now. Highlights. I've seen 3 junks, but no boobs. Well, no flashers. I did see some accidental boobs. No accidental penises. One time I was sweeping the floor, I found a little baggie of white powder. Substances of some kind, I assume. I put it back on the counter by the register, figured I'd just throw it away when I was done sweeping. I forget about it until an hour later and it's gone. Some customer got some free substances. I was robbed at gunpoint once. The guy pointed the gun at me, said, "Put all the money in the bag right now." Literally, the first thing I said to him was there anything else I can get for you today? I guess you don't realize how robotic your interactions can become. For the record, he didn't want anything else. And he only got about $75. I had a guy either go off his meds or get on some come and tell me all about how aliens taught him calculus. I actually had some of my Calc 3 homework I asked him to help me out with, but he said they taught him using different symbols, so nothing I had made sense. He's a regular customer, and that was the only time he seemed nutty. Usually just gets coffee and leaves. So many people have the perfect system to win on scratch tickets. Only buy tickets numbered 1, 10. Only buy tickets within the first 2 weeks of a new game. Only buy tickets within 2 of a line break. Only buy tickets on the last 5. People, lottery tickets are random. I hate people as an entertainment. If you come in and are being an annoying drunk or stoner but say, hey, at least it's entertaining for you, right? No, it isn't. And finally, one of my weirdest stories. About 2 or 3 a.m., nobody in my store, I see a car pull up in front. It stays there a couple minutes until both doors open and 2 guys get out. One of them is wearing what looks like to be a nice suit, fit well, looked good. The other is wearing nothing but a garbage bag, like he poked 2 holes for his legs and had the drawstring pulled tight just below his armpits. So as they're getting out, they're clearly arguing with each other, but they're still outside so I can't make out any of the words. The garbage bag guy then goes full Hulkamaniac and rips the bag off himself and storms off away from my store completely naked, walking into the night. Nice suit guy gets in his car and drives off in the other direction. I guess that means I've actually seen 4 junks. Story 41. I worked overnights in a beach town gas station convenience store combo. Wawa for my New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Florida people. It was notorious in the summer on Friday or Saturday night for the drunk Guidos to come in and get food drinks at 2, 3 a.m. after last call at the beach bars. There was this group of girls that went out every weekend and came in every weekend. Always drove drunk every weekend. I didn't bother calling cops because they had a cop stationed on the road leaving Wawa. They got someone every night. One night, they came in, got their sandwiches and cigarettes. While they were leaving, they crashed directly into one of the gas station islands. I ran outside to make sure they were all right. The driver started panicking and backed up to go around it and ended up crashing into it again. At this point, I decided to go back inside because she was being way too reckless. Ended up knocking a gas pump over and driving away. The ending was rather anticlimactic. We knew who she was and had her make/model/license. Cops ended up getting her. Was funny. Notice. Story 42. Okay, so when I was 18, I used to work as a night auditor for a pretty nice hotel. The kind with a huge lobby, motion sensor doors, big fancy lifts where the operators ask for tips. ECT, so I start my shift as normal around 9 p.m. It's always quiet, so I bring a book in with me to get me through the night. I've been sitting in silence for maybe 3 hours, all by myself. All other departments are closed, and the only staff remaining were myself and the night manager, who was taking a nap in an empty room. I hear a tapping noise and look up to see a young child, maybe 5 or 6, wearing what I could only describe as an extra's costume from M. Night Shamalamadandongs the village peering in at me from the large windows adjacent to the main entrance. Slowly, from the thick fog and darkness behind him emerges a tall, bearded man in similar attire who immediately makes eye contact with me. He points at the door and gestures for me to open it. Terrified, but aware that it was my duty to welcome all guests, I step out from behind the front desk and begin to make my way towards the front door, confused and scared. I shout through the window to come inside as I was unable to leave the hotel. He simply stares back at me. one hand on the shoulder of the child, still and quiet, always keeping eye contact. For about 30 seconds, I stood in the middle of the reception, watching as this man pointed at the door. I was about to break the rules and step through the threshold when I hear whispers behind the glass, while about 3 dozen more ghosts become visible through the fog, all looking 200 years late for some satanic event. That's when I turn around and get the damn. I nope my way up the stairs to the manager's room and cried nonsense to my half-asleep colleague. After about a minute of my fit, he snaps up and shouts, "Damn the Jews!" and barges out the room. Turns out, that weekend was Sabbath, and without any prior knowledge or information provided to me, a very large party of Orthodox Jews had booked into the hotel. They were in town for some sort of pilgrimage tour. They are forbidden to use technology or something on Sundays, maybe. Not exactly clear on how it works. They just wanted to get inside, but couldn't use the automatic sliding doors. The boy and his father had run ahead to see that someone could let everyone in without complications. Whoops. Story 43. I used to work nights at a hotel. I once found an established actor passed out in a lobby. I honestly thought he was dead, but I was able to wake him, and he started on about how La Costa Nostra was after him. Story 44. Oh, I got one. I worked at a Domino's in a really crafty part of town, maybe 10 years ago. I was the insider, making the food and answering phones. So I was there the whole time, but after 8 p.m. we only delivered, door was locked. Well, one night it's pouring rain, thunder, lightning, the whole deal. This massive guy walks up to the door and starts knocking loudly. I go up to see what is going on, and he yells through the door to give him aluminum foil. Well, being curious as to why this guy is standing outside of a business in some crazy weather, I ask why. Also, there was a very seedy motel next door. I was thinking substances. Apparently, he wants to make a lightning rod. I look at the only driver who is in the building, and he just says, "Damn it," walks over, rips about 5 feet off the roll, folds it up so it'll fit through the mail slot, and slides it through. This guy unfolds it in the pouring rain as we watch. Wraps it once around his head and make the rest into one big rod sticking out the top of his head. Looked like a conspiracy theorist with those tin foil hats crossed with a unicorn. Then he ran off down the middle of the street. 10 minutes later, some fat lady came by to ask if we had seen someone just like that guy. The one who made a lightning rod and stuck it on his head? He went that way? Oh man, wonder what happened to them. Story 45. It was Pledge Week, which means all of Frat Row are holding parties all week long. We were a special store in this town because we were open 24/7 and right across the street from Frat Row. Our manager and our entire store was considered sacred ground and was accepted by all frats to never be ducked with. We provided the cigs and late-night subs and meatball subs. I could literally walk into any frat party and be shoved tons of free beer in my hand out of appreciation, just because they recognized me from the store. Started with this one pledge coming in and acting like a huge ass. He was knocking crap over, being super sloppy, and just interfering with business. Our manager asked which house they were from, and even though he wasn't an official member yet, proudly said it. She went to the back office. "Hey Chuck, one of your pledges is causing some trouble over here. Can you take care of—" "Oh, you're on your way. Thanks." They came running if someone made her life a little bit bad. She was not a stunner, which pissed out of all the sorry girls who got skipped when she was pushed to the front of the beer line, but she was loved by all of them. 5 minutes later, Chuck shows up with 2 members. Pledge sees Chuck and he goes all pale. Chuck walks up and shoves the pledge out of the door. "Sorry, he'll be taken care of and he's banned from here now." The manager wasn't even mad, but he made sure to send members to buy during her shift for the rest of the week, even if it was in the morning. Story 46. I never worked as a clerk in one of these stores, but I accidentally freaked one out one night. When I was in college, I bought a ratty old El Camino. One night, the brakes were a bit spongy, so I checked the brake fluid, and it was low. I decided to head up the road a few blocks to the Texaco station to get some. It turns out to have been a bad idea. The Texaco was on the corner of a very busy intersection. Just as I went to slow down to turn into the station, my brakes went out completely. At this point, I have 2 choices. No. 1, go straight through the red light and into the intersection, hoping for the best. No. 2, whip into the empty Texaco parking lot and go through it to the big shopping center parking lot where I'll have a lot more room to coast. I noped on number 1 and whipped into the Texaco. Unfortunately, it turned out their parking lot didn't connect to the shopping center. I went as far as I dared, then attempted a U-turn. This stopped the car pretty effectively. Not because it bled off enough speed, but because I misjudged the distance and made a hard right up onto the curb that separated the parking area from the car wash. From the clerk's perspective, some guy just careened into the parking lot without slowing down, zipped past the pumps, and then swerved 90 degrees before slamming into the curb. The poor clerk actually hid from me at first until I convinced her that my brakes had failed. I'm pretty sure she still believed I had been drinking. She eventually sold me a couple of bottles of brake fluid, but she watched me like a hawk until I left. Story 47. I worked as a clerk through high school and college in a low-income area of a rural, economically depressed former mining town. Weird stuff was a weekly occurrence. My personal favorite story to tell is the tale of two bathrooms. One day when I was 17, I got called to the courtesy desk. I assumed to help a customer find something or clean a mess. I was partially right on both counts. I was handed a pane of neatly pressed pants and jockeys by the girl behind the counter. She said a gentleman in the men's room needed them. You can see where this is going. But hold on, there's a few bumps. I enter the men's room to find a 300-plus-pound man standing in front of the only two stalls looking like his dog just jumped from a moving car. He obviously had to take a crap, but the handicap stall, preferable for a man of his size, was obviously occupied. He then, in a fit of desperation, grabbed the handle of the handicap door and jostled it lightly. A small whimper came from the other side. He then jostled it again. No response that time. The third time, he grabbed the top of the door as well and shook it as hard as he could. Meanwhile, I'm standing stock still with ironed pants and underbreeches in my hand. From behind the door, I hear a moan that was a cross between Woodhouse from Archer and a Wookiee who just nutted. The fat man, feeling nature's call, getting too close for comfort, shouted, "Damn this town," and then proceeded to back his oversized ass into the normal stall. He got stuck 2 times on the way down. Walls were too narrow for his ass. As he proceeded to destroy the normal stall with gusto, vengeance, and the door jammed open due to his large thighs, I slipped past and knocked on the handicap door. A man answered, smelling of crap. I passed him the fresh clothes and left the room contemplating quitting. Oh, and bathroom number 2. Later that night, we discovered a girl in pajamas wedged under the sink in the ladies' room eating a pint of ice cream and sobbing. Story 48. This is probably too late and will be forever buried, but here goes. I was working the swing shift at a gas station. At around 10:30 p.m., I was eating some corn nuts while I was sweeping up the parking lot when this white Cadillac pulls in and starts doing circles in the parking lot. The driver is blasting some weird Indian chanting, and when he finally parks his car and gets out, he is wearing these flowing white robes. I go inside to get ready to ring him up, and he slowly glides up to the door like he is on a mission. When he gets inside, he doesn't buy anything and just asks me if I read. I told him, yes, sir, I do in fact read. He asks me if I have ever read the Bhagavad Gita, and I say no. He seems disappointed at first, but then asks if I would like a free copy. I say why not, and he begins his glide out to the car. As he walks back, I meet him near the door where he hands me the books. Yet as soon as I touch him, he yells, "Wait! This is the Indian holy book, and I cannot just give it to you. A donation must be offered." I told the guy he offered me a free book, and I am not going to pay for it. He says it is not payment, it is a donation. Then says anything will do as he begins to list off acceptable donations. 150, 20, 10, 5, and $1. I say I don't have $1, but this guy is persistent. He says whatever I have in my pocket will be good enough. So I reach into my pocket and pull out a handful of ranch corn nuts. He swipes them quickly and then gives me the book. As he turns around to leave, he puts his arms out to the side, palms face up, and begins to chant as he glides back to his car. It was around this time that I recognized his chanting and realized that it wasn't his radio playing as he entered the parking lot. This dude just drove in slow circles while singing in his car. Story 49. I'm sure I'm too late to the party, but I used to work for the Main Street Taco Bell at Osu. The place was always packed on party nights and always had an officer nearby to direct the drunks. But these guys were chill. As long as you didn't get belligerent, you were safe. Anyway, it was a night like any other. We closed the doors at 2 a.m., and as customers eating inside left the restaurant, the place eventually cleared so that only employees were left. The main restaurant was locked, but we still served food to customers who used the drive-thru. The employees continued doing our jobs, serving cars like normal until sometime around 3 a.m. some crazy lady runs up to the window, which is a big no-no, and starts asking us to help her find her friend. So we keep trying to tell her to leave the drive, though, and that she's holding up the line, and if she doesn't leave, we'll have to call the police. This git is cray, hollering that she's going to sue our asses if her friend is hurt. But when we tell her that the police are on their way, she leaves. So flash forward about an hour. It's like 4 a.m., and really starting to get quiet until suddenly a lady in the drive-thru is screaming at us through the speaker. "Tell me where my friend is." It's that girl again, and now she's in a car. She says that her and her friend was in our restaurant a few hours ago, and that she lost her friend here. We agree to send someone out to scout the tables, but sure enough, there are no customers in the place. We apologize, but we have no idea where her friend is, and ensure the lady that her friend must have left. The lady is pissed, but she eventually leaves. At 6 a.m., I leave and go home. I'm sleeping after a long night until my phone finally wakes me because it's ringing like crazy. The morning manager is demanding explanations from us because he has discovered a passed out and vomit-covered girl in one of our dry storage cabinet. Crap. We did have that crazy woman's friend after all. Story 50. Ex-girlfriend of mine was in college in Dublin in the early 90s. She worked for Extra Vision. It's like an Irish version of Blockbuster, a video rental shop that closed at midnight. On her second night on the job, an addict comes in with a syringe held it to her neck. He told her that he was HIV positive, and unless she emptied the cash register that he would inject her. She gave him the money. Nearly collapsed out of fright. Called the cops. Called her boss. She was absolutely distraught. The boss came in, was wonderfully understanding, commiserated with her, and sent her home for the night with double pay. She cried herself to sleep and vowed never to work there again. The pay, however, was very good, and her boss was cool, so she went back. She worked for another month, and it happened again. Another addict, another syringe. This time, she didn't bother calling the cops, but called her boss, who came in and let her go home for the night, with pay. It happened again about a month later. This time, when she calls her boss, he asks her, "You okay to keep working?" She says, "Yeah, I guess," and goes on with her night like nothing had happened. Boss didn't even bother coming in. She worked there for a year and was held up 7 times. Always by addict, always with syringes. And the kicker is, anytime there was more than 20 notes in the till, it was dropped in a time safe in the floor. The addict only made 10 to 15 notes at a time. The owner just treated it like a legitimate business expense. He reckoned it was cheaper to lose out once a month to addict and pay his staff that little bit extra than hire a security firm. Dublin in the early 90s was in the middle of an epidemic of substances. Story 51. Regular male customer living across the street came over with flip-flops and a towel around his waist, dripping wet. Grabbed a bar of soap, tossed $5 on the counter, and walked back out. Had 3 girls walk in at about 3 in the morning. I would swear they were 13, 15 years old. Black miniskirts, see-through black tops, red bras, bought some candy and left. Story 52. I worked at a pharmacy, and this older man came in, picked up some Tylenol, and while walking out, he was dropping turds in our office supplies aisle. He was fully clothed, didn't seem to be in any hurry due to impending BM. He just let them fall straight out of his ass, down his pant legs, and onto our carpet. Story 53. Had a guy fill up with fuel, then come in to pay. Got a coffee and a few other items. Said he was going camping and started talking to me about his plans for the weekend. Just a normal guy going camping with his kids. After a few sips of his coffee, heads back out and loads up his truck. A few minutes go by, and I can see flames in the back heap of his truck. These were roughly 2 feet tall flames I cold see coming up from his truck bed right next to the gas pump. I hit the emergency shutoff for the gas pumps and grab a fire extinguisher, heading to his truck. The other half dozen people trying to fuel are either yelling at me or the truck. I arrive at the truck and tell the guy to stand back so I can put out the fire. He was in the back of the truck and spins around, yells, "No," so I pause. He had a propane grill of some kind and was checking it to make sure it worked. I yelled to turn it off or I would put it out for him. He argued some more and I pulled the pin and extinguished his grill. Yelled at him for a couple and told him to get out. Dude is pissed and covered in white powder, jumps in his truck and drives off. Next shift, store manager and his boss show up to fire me. I told my side of the story, was sent home while they checked it out. 3 other employees saw what happened. Apparently, the guy called the complaint line and said I went nuts and sprayed him with the extinguisher for no reason. Was called in about 2 hours by my boss laughing. Apparently, they pulled the video and saw to the whole thing. People can be really stupid. Story 54. I worked at a 24/7's convenience store. One night, I had a customer come in, clearly drunk, and ask where the bathrooms were. I directed him to the bathrooms, which were in the store, but he kept saying, "Oh, okay, they're around the back." "No, they're right there." "Okay, I'll go around back." He left through the front door. I imagined he would just go on the side of the building, so not my problem anymore. Then I look up, and he's behind the cash register looking for a toilet, I assume. My coworker left the back door unlocked. I was across the store stocking, so I yelled to my coworker to get him out. The drunk dude was nice enough about the mix-up and pretended it was just a joke, I guess. Then my coworker guided him to the actual restrooms. I started stalking near the restrooms to kind of keep an ear on him, and from inside the restroom I hear, I'm peeing everywhere! I'm gonna pee on the sink, the toilet, damn this hand dryer! I'm just kidding, clerk guy. I'm only peeing in the toilet!" The guy came out and laughing so hard he was crying, then left after buying some Funyuns. He was laughing at himself the whole time on his way out, like he'd just pulled the funniest prank of his life. Story 55. Oh boy, I've got lots of these. I used to work at a very small gas station just outside Detroit, and since everyone else who worked there were 90-pound high school students, I always got to work the night shift. Yay me. I was robbed 4 times, mugged 6, shot at probably a dozen times, and had a knife thrown at me once. One night, around 11:30, I'm standing behind the counter watching cars pass under the overpass when 6 guys in ski masks run into the store. 2 of them stand either side of me and opposite the counter, but facing towards the back of the store. They are barking orders at the others, telling them what to grab, what drinks and snacks. So for about maybe 5 minutes, I'm standing there watching this unfold, wondering when I'm going to actually be robbed, or if all they want is to steal food and crap. Wouldn't really surprise me. Finally, the ordering about stops, and they all line up between the 2 guys, who finally turn around to face me. Here it is, I thought. The demands for money or cigarettes or something. Nope. The guy's orderly stepped up to the counter, and the 2 men who had been giving orders took turns paying for the stuff they had grabbed. I have no idea who these men were, and it never happened again after that. Story 56. I guess my experiences were the opposite of most on here. Not a great part of town, but some wonderful people. I worked the midnight shift at 7-11 right off the highway. I'm female. The first night, there are an awful lot of people trailing in from the Doskatsil factory next door. All night, at least one if not more. We have comp cups for the police, and I was perfectly happy to hand these out for sodas or coffee, 8 ounces. But they always picked up snacks and stuff. Found out later that they staggered their breaks to always have a guy in the store, so I never had any problems. They did this anytime a girl worked the night shift. Faith in humanity restored. Story 57. This came from one of my instructors at Front Site, the largest civilian firearms training center in the U.S. The instructor was formerly a cop in Bakersfield, KA. He was coming home one night from his shift, dressed in civilian clothes and carrying his Glock 19 concealed. He stopped in the convenience store for 2 gallons of milk. He gets the milk, turns around from the cooler, gallon of milk in each hand, and all of a sudden, a guy in a ski mask busts in with a shotgun. The intruder walks up to the clerk at the register, racks around into the chamber of the shotgun, and yells for the clerk to give him all the money from the register. Our protagonist takes cover behind an aisle shelf of wares, drops the milk, and draws his Glock. He comes up above the level of the shelves and puts his front sight on the head of the robber, the only part that's exposed to him. The way he tells the story, he says he had taken up 5 pounds of a 5.5 pounds Glock trigger when he hears a voice behind him say, "Stop, we're shooting a movie." It was a local college film group, and one of them almost died. Story 58. I worked at late-night pizza place in an area with many bars. We were the only place still open after the bars closed, and it would be freaking busy starting at about 11 p.m. on. I could ramble for days with stories about this, but one always comes to mind. It was about 30 minutes past closing time one Friday night when I went to give the bathroom a once-over. They were thoroughly cleaned every morning, so at night, all I had to do was a cursory glance for anything exceptional. Well, this night, exceptional was what I found. Lying on the floor, completely nude, smeared all over in feces, was this incoherently blackout drunk, but undeniably stunning young lady in her mid-20s. I didn't know what to do. Her clothes were nowhere to be found, and when I say smeared in feces, it was in her hair, on her nose, in her belly button, between her cleavage, you name it, feces. I tried to wake her up by calling out, "Hey, are you okay? Wake up!" and so forth, as I did not want to touch her. Finally, she opened her eyes a little, rolled over onto her back, spread her legs, and mumbled something along the lines of, "I'll let you duck me if I can sleep here tonight." I just shook my head, closed the door, and called her an ambulance. Paramedics came, carried her off into the sunset, and I never heard anything about it again. Fun times? Story 59. I had a regular customer come in and buy the same exact beer and cigarettes every day. He was always muttering something, but I could never make out what he was saying. I really paid close attention one day, and he was rambling on about horse racing and the different odds for the horses. He was an interesting character. Also had a guy come in high as damn with his mom, and he bought $60 worth of greeting cards. That guy was pretty cool. Story 60. I worked at a Walgreens in a not-so-great area, and things would happen on the regular, but none were as weird as this. A man who was a regular came in every day to buy a bag of candy, had no teeth, and seemed really strange, but I was always cool with him since he was a regular. Then one night after getting his candy, he comes back in, which he has never done before, and looks at me with the strangest look on his face and puts this small piece of paper on my counter. No words exchanged, and he leaves for real this time. Then weirded out, I opened the letter, which said, in the creepiest chicken scratch handwriting, "Hey, my name. I was wondering if you would like to see Spider-Man with me tomorrow at the mall at 7 p.m. If so, meet me there at 6 inches. And if I recall, there was some type of smiley face at the end." The dude was about 50-something, and I was around 20. Of course, I didn't go, but I never saw the dude in my store ever again. But I did recently see him at a FI and booked it when I saw him. I'm a dude. Story 61. Not me, but a buddy of mine worked at a convenience store for a while and told me about a guy that bought out every single bottled soda they had. Coke, Dr. Pepper, Sprite, you name it. Just kept piling them on the counter until he had a couple $100 worth of soda. Soda addict sweeps 7/11ths of all sugary nectar. Story 62. Not super late, but at the last minute, this dude came into Best Buy when I was working in the mobile store. He was tatted up, shaved head, had a Hispanic GF, and he was a pretty nice guy. Made me laugh a bit. I go to grab a phone out of the cabinet, and a coworker asked how it was going with the neo-Nazi. I was confused. Apparently, he had lots of tells, mostly from his tattoos. I thought my coworker was full of crap until I went back and noticed the small swastika tat on the space between his thumb and first finger. I got a little nervous being non-white, but he was super cool, personable, funny, and had a Hispanic GF for crying out loud. I consider it weird because he was so chill. Best neo-Nazi customer I've ever had. Story 63. A fat woman with real stringy hair and no teeth came in my store one night while I worked as a gas station clerk. She walked to the cooler and grabbed a soda, but the whole time she was in the store, she was looking at me all wide-eyed. She came up to the register, still looking dead at me and hardly blinking, put her soda on the counter, and then said, "I birthed you." "Excuse me?" I said, "I birthed you. You came out of my body." I'm pretty sure my mom gave birth to me. You came out of my body. I birthed you in the mountains of Tennessee. I just took her money and then she left." Story 64. When your car catches on fire at 3 a.m., do not pull into a gas station for help. I mean, I shut off the pumps and we got the fire put out. But still, common sense fail. I actually really rather enjoyed that job though. Story 65. I drive truck and my shift started at 1 a.m. today. At the Flying J, I saw a man eating food with two Beanie Babies and they had their own water glass. The guy's shirt had a tie heart, BB logo on it. Man loves his Beanie Babies. Story 66. Not so much a store clerk, but I worked the desk at a busy hospital in radiology on a night shift. This made me the only non-doctor who wasn't behind glass on the first floor when people came into the building. We were inner city and also had a psych hospital attached, so things got weird. The strangest one-time occurrence was a woman just jogging through fully naked, not even socks, no hospital bracelet, and about 20 seconds behind her, about 3 security men would run by asking which way. It was like a cartoon because she would run into a room. Someone would scream. She'd run out the back door. It went on for a few hours. Story 67. Work in a pharmacy. We had a guy come in and pick up a prescription and he's standing there with a tub of ice cream and a spoon. I asked if he bought that. He just says yeah and walks off. 20 minutes later, I help a customer find something in the store and I see an empty shopping cart with a half-empty tub of melted ice cream. I reported it to the manager and they said, "I didn't see it, so we can't do anything. But I know his name, and I know for a fact he's going to be back in 30 days for a refill." Story 68. A large, fully grown black adult mental patient would come in from time to time and ask for free snacks. I'm not joking. He really was a mental patient. Apparently, he would escape from his assisted living care building, and I would always have to call the cops to come get him. This would happen multiple times. It got to the point where as soon as he came in, I would just give him an ice cream and just sit him down to keep him occupied. He probably only had the intelligence of a small child. Story 69. I worked at a 7-Eleven in a rough neighborhood for years. Most of the customers were regulars, including these 3 addicts who came in one night. They were clearly high, so my coworker says, "Watch this." He proceeds to change the iPod to Michael Jackson's greatest hits. The addicts immediately begin ballroom dancing around the 7-Eleven. I'm talking foxtrot, waltz, jive, quickstep, samba. This went on for all 12 songs on that playlist. During this time, customers would approach the store, see 3 of them dancing up a storm, and immediately turn and walk away. That might not be the craziest thing that ever happened to me, but it was one of the most entertaining. Story 70. I worked nights at a campus library. One fine evening, I was greeted by a bat. It was clearly quite confused, and spent a good 20 minutes making laps around the lobby. Every few laps, the cursed creature bombed one of us, flittering over our heads. I called campus PD, expecting them to call animal control. Instead, every bored cop on campus showed up. One of them swatted the poor guy out of the air with his nightstick. The bat bit him when he picked it up. Story 71. This happened last year. Our produce guy reported some strange sounds coming from the roof, as if there was an animal up there. We called in the cops, and our stock crew supervisor led a couple officers up there to investigate. A few minutes later, I saw the officers escorting a ragged couple away in handcuffs. They looked like meth heads that just came from Mayhem Festival. Apparently, they had a shovel and wanted to dig down through the roof and into our pharmacy without anyone noticing. I'm used to keeping an eye out for shoplifters, but I never thought to suspect noises from the damn roof. Story 72. This was just night, not overnight, but had a lady come in, drunk, trying to buy beer. Clerk wouldn't let her. I was stalking, so not me, but yeah, because drunk. She told him off, walked out to her car, and purposely ran over pump 2. The clerk freaked and ran outside after her. The customer at the counter calmly wrote down her plate number. "You'd a real hero, random Asian dude." This was all on camera and hilarious later. She went to jail for her 5th DUI. Story 73. I felt bad for the guy, but he would show up at about 2 a.m. He was severely obese and would buy and eat Twinkies in their store for about half-an hour. He was under strict diet control by his wife, so he would sneak out to eat. He'd eat 10 to 15 Twinkies with some milk then leave. I sort of felt bad for not trying to give him encouragement to not eat, but at that point, I don't think he could be reasoned with. Story 74. I used to D overnights at a 7-Eleven many years ago. There's a box in the cooler with loose beer that isn't on inventory. Basically, whenever some punk steals a single Bud Light, they have to write off the rest of the 6-pack. Not exactly strange, but we got drunk a lot in the middle of the night. Nothing better than free beer and recently expired donuts. Story 75. Not a late night worker, but we have this one old lady that stops by our store just before we close at least once a month to spout some insane, nonsensical poetry at us. Usually, stuff about security cameras shooting lasers into your brain when you aren't looking. She asks us if we understand. We smile and nod. She giggles and shuffles off. Fun stuff.